Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at building this custom NH34 Batgirl GMT watch I did for a local law enforcement unit. Starting off, we have all the components needed for the build, and first is the Jubilee style bracelet equipped with glide lock clasp. Next is the 40mm stainless steel maxi style case. This build will use an exhibition style caseback, which will show off the aftermarket rotor complete with custom engraving. Next is a blue bridge decorated with cotes de Geneve. We have a black and blue ceramic GMT bezel. Then comes the Master Arrow GMT hand, followed by the polished stainless steel Mercedes style handset, then the NH34 GMT movement, and last but not least our black enamel dial featuring a custom logo and phrasing. To start off the build, I'm going to secure the movement into my movement holder dial side down. This will give me access to the rear of the movement and allow me to swap out the stock automatic train bridge and the winding rotor for the decorated options you just saw. The first step in this operation is removing the original rotor. To do this, I'll use the biggest screwdriver in my set to unscrew the rotor from its post in the center of the movement. Once that has been released from the threads, I'll use my plastic tweezers to remove the rotor completely. With the rotor out of the way, I have access to the automatic train bridge, which also needs to be removed. This is done by unscrewing two screws, one at each end of the bridge, and removing those before pulling the bridge itself out. As this operation is taken care of on screen, we can discuss the origin of this build, or should I say builds. The officer who commissioned these builds is a member of the Honor Guard in a local police department. After seeing the watches I had previously done for another specialized unit, he wanted to have a batch of 16 watches built for his unit. However, this order would be a bit different from the first, as there was a greater variety in the styles he requested. While the majority of the order consisted of Batman GMT style builds, there were also a few smaller Datejust style watches included as well. Additionally, the casebacks varied significantly across the order, with there being a mix of exhibition and solid casebacks, with the solid casebacks featuring several different choices for the engravings. Now that the stock bridge has been removed, I can begin installing the decorated one. I presented a few decorative bridge options to choose from, and several of the officers opted for this blue bridge, finished with the cotes de Geneve pattern. The metallic blue worked really well with the rest of the watch's color scheme, giving the whole piece a cohesive look. It was also quite different from anything I'd used before, as the builds typically feature the gray tones of stainless steel and in some cases yellow or rose gold. As I mentioned in a previous video, the cotes de Geneve pattern isn't just for looks. Originally, this striped pattern was machined into bridges as a way to trap microscopic dust particles, keeping them away from the finer, more sensitive components of the movement. These days, with improvements to modern filtering and higher cleanroom standards, dust is much less of a threat. But the pattern still serves a practical purpose, and let's be honest, it still looks great, especially in this blue finish. Some of the other officers decided to use solid casebacks instead, opting for personal engravings. Most of them chose to engrave their badge numbers, with a few deciding to have short personal messages inscribed. It was really cool to see the range of personalization and how each officer wanted something a little different to make their watch their own. That said, I have to admit my personal favorites were the ones with the exhibition caseback, decorative bridges, and custom rotors. Just a quick note, most of the watches featured on this channel are commission builds. Whether it be a single watch or a larger order for things like police units, I'm always open to new build opportunities. If you're interested in having a custom watch build, feel free to reach out to me at garrett@goldenstatewatchshop.com or over on Instagram at goldenstatewatchshop, and I'd be happy to discuss the build or builds in more detail. The rotors used in the watches with exhibition casebacks provided an opportunity to try something new. While upgrading to a decorative rotor is one thing, personalizing that rotor is a step above. There were a few officers who were looking to have their badge numbers laser engraved on the rotor itself. Luckily, the rotor design they had chosen provided a nice untouched spot in the center, so I reached out to the laser engraver to see if it was possible. He didn't foresee any issues and was eager to give it a try. After creating a jig and doing some test runs on stock rotors, we gave it a shot, and this is the final result. With the back of the movement addressed, I can flip the movement over and start working on the dial. For these watches, we're using a black enamel dial with polished stainless steel hour markers loomed with BGW9 and featuring a custom logo. The unit originally wanted the dial to use a logo from the unit's challenge coin. The logo depicted an officer in full uniform with white gloves holding a tri-folded flag. Unfortunately, we were not able to pull the detail from the coin and had to search for another option. I discussed several different logo options with the team via email before landing on the logo displayed on the current dial. In addition to the custom logo, there were several lines of text below the center hole, the first being "Honoring the Fallen." Below that, the phrase "Numquam obliviscar," which in Latin means "I will never forget." These are nods to the responsibilities of the Honor Guard unit that I will briefly mention later on. Now that the dial feet have been clipped and filed down, I can press the dial into place. I'm always careful to place my fingers right at the edge of the dial as a way to keep the dial as clean as possible. Then it's just a matter of pushing the dial down so it sits flat to the movement. With the dial now in place, I can move on to installing the GMT hand. To do this, I'll first pull out the crown stem to the time setting position and wind it around until the date flicks over, signifying the watch is set to midnight. I'll then use my plastic tweezers to place the Master Arrow style GMT hand over its post before breaking out the hand setting tool and giving it a firm but gentle press into position. There's a balance that needs to be found when installing GMT hands over dials with applied hour markers. At least in this case, the hour markers are quite tall. If the GMT hand is set parallel to the dial, it would make contact with the hour marker as it swept around the dial. In order to avoid this, the GMT hand needs to be set slightly angled upward so that it can pass over the raised markers, avoiding any contact. This angle needs to be high enough to not contact any of the markers, but needs to be low enough to provide enough room for the hour hand to come. On dials with printed indices, this issue is much less prevalent as the indices sit much lower, if not flat to the dial. As you just saw, I pressed the GMT hand onto its post, and now I'm just winding the hand around the dial, making sure that it doesn't make contact with any of the hour markers. We are again using the Mercedes style handset for this build. This handset style is synonymous with the Rolex professional watches, and there are a number of theories as to why Rolex uses them. Some say it's due to the shared German roots of Rolex founder Hans Wilsdorf and the Mercedes-Benz brand. Others say it's because the loom wouldn't be able to hold itself up without the Mercedes cross-section in the hour hand. I choose to believe the iconic hands are a reference to Mercedes glides. See, Mercedes liked to swim, though not in pools. She preferred open waters. She swam from Cape Town to Robben Island, and 2 days later, swam back. She was the first person to swim across the Strait of Gibraltar, and was the first British woman to swim across the English Channel. Her most recognized swim took place on October 21st, 1972. Rolex gave her a Rolex Oyster watch to wear around her neck as she attempted to cross the channel in order to showcase the waterproof capabilities of their newly developed case. Unfortunately, Mercedes didn't complete the swim. Still, her efforts weren't in vain. The watch was unaffected by the water even after hours of exposure. Mercedes became Rolex's first brand ambassador, and the company heavily promoted both her courage and the reliability of their watch. It was a pivotal moment that helped shape Rolex's identity as a maker of rugged, purpose-built watches. Thus, I like to think that the Mercedes-style hands are a quiet tribute to the efforts of Mercedes Gleitz herself. With the hour hand set in place, I can move on to the minute hand. As mentioned, there were a few different styles of watches in this batch. While the GMT style builds received Mercedes style hands, the Datejust style builds used baton style hands. The minute hand on the baton and Mercedes handsets have a similar look, however the tip of the baton hand ends in a flat edge rather than coming to a point as seen here. The name is derived from a baton and its straight and narrow dimensions. I've done a few videos featuring baton-style hands, most notably the green dial Snoopy Day Date and the teeny tiny Datejust I built for my girlfriend. I'll be sure to post pictures of the different watch variations on my Instagram account to illustrate the differences between the builds. The final hand that needs to be installed is the seconds hand. I install this hand a little bit differently than the previous hand. I stick a small amount of Rotor in the center of my smallest hand setting tool, then I can use that to pick up the seconds hand and place it onto its post. By applying the slightest bit of pressure, I can get the hand to transfer onto the post. I'll then come back with a clean hand setting tool to push the seconds hand down fully, securing it in place. With the movement, dial, and hands now sorted, I can turn my attention to the case. The most important step here is ensuring that the crystal is spotless, making sure to remove any dust, debris, or smudges from it, especially from the inside of the case. There are few things worse than getting a movement cased up and flipping the watch around to find a speck of something on the inside of the crystal. Fortunately, this crystal was relatively clean, and with the use of a microfiber, a lens pen, some micro Q-tips, and Rotor, I was able to get it spotless. As I remove the crown from the movement and prepare to get it cased up, I'd like to address the unit these watches are made for. The officer who commissioned these builds is a member of the Honor Guard. The Honor Guard is a collateral assignment, which in this department consists of officers, sergeants, and lieutenants. They are responsible for conducting flag-raising ceremonies and Honor Guard details at special events. These events include things like police department-sponsored functions and parades. They are also tasked with the honorable duty of presiding at officer funerals, both those who have been killed in the line of duty, as well as those peace officers who have been honorably retired from the department. As you can imagine, the utmost respect must be shown during these funerals and ceremonies, therefore only the most highly motivated officers who have maintained exceptionally high standards of appearance, conduct, and who show aptitude for ceremonial duty are chosen for the unit. Things like marching, saluting, properly folding a casket flag, and how to conduct a 21-gun salute using blank ammunition are meticulously trained to ensure not only precision but perfection when these actions are demonstrated. It's a unit made up of men and women who embody honor and commitment and play a pivotal role in upholding these solemn traditions. Now, the officer who reached out to commission these builds is no stranger to watches himself. He mentioned he initially got into watches in 2022 when he was visiting family in Europe. His initial discovery was actually pocket watches, though with time and research, his interest gradually changed from pocket watches to wristwatches. As his interest in watches grew, so did his interest in the history of watchmaking and the big players in the industry. Soon after, he began building his collection, which now contains quite a vast range of watches from brands like Omega, Rolex, Tudor, Tag Heuer, Jaeger-LeCoultre, Seiko, Grand Seiko, Hamilton, and Zangen. Speaking of Seiko, he stated he had a huge respect for them and their history, and he actually had a chance to visit their original store in Tokyo. On the same trip, he was able to purchase several JDM Seikos, as well as a Grand Seiko Ginza. As this Batgirl homage is a bit more sporty than some of the other watches in his collection, he sees it as a daily wear. In the case of the sports watches I build, this is exactly what I want to hear. I like when these watches are constantly worn and they're out getting beat up, scratched, and marked up. In line with this homage, the officer said his grail piece would be the Rolex Batgirl or a JLC Master Ultra Thin. Unfamiliar with the Ultra Thin, I looked into it. The Master Ultra Thin is actually a series of dress watches offered by JLC. The series contains several watches offering a variety of complications from different types of date displays, moon phases, power reserve indicators, and even perpetual calendars and tourbillon options. And as the name implies, all of these options are extremely thin, with some of them coming in less than 10 millimeters in thickness. As you just saw, I went through my normal process of measuring the distance between the case and the crown before cutting down the crown stem and using my Dremel to remove any burrs before adding Loctite and reinstalling the crown onto the stem. With that done, I can move on to lubricating the various gaskets and O-rings of the watch. I used a micro Q-tip to apply silicone grease to the gasket inside the crown as well as inside the crown tube. I then followed my normal procedure of taking the caseback gasket out and placing it in a container with 2 sponges that have been impregnated with silicone grease. And after a few twists and turns, it's ready to be installed. And now that the crown has been secured in place with Loctite and all the gaskets are sufficiently lubricated, I can look into getting the head of the watch fully assembled. First, I'll place the crown stem into the crown tube and push it through the case and into the movement, making sure it's aligned correctly. Then I can drop the movement spacer into place. These come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and for this watch, it's basically just a washer used to hold the movement in place with pressure when the caseback is installed. And finally, I can secure everything in place by screwing down the caseback. We are rounding third and heading for home now. To complete the head of the watch, I need to install the bezel insert. As mentioned before, I'm using a black and blue ceramic GMT bezel insert, typically referred to as the Batman due to its colorway. When working in tandem with the GMT hand, this watch can display the time in 2 different time zones. Some will argue you can actually track 3 time zones due to its rotating bezel, but that's a bit of a stretch. To achieve this, the wearer would first need to set the watch to the local time using the hour hand and the dial. They would then set the time to their home time zone using the GMT hand and the bezel. To find the time in a third time zone, the wearer must first know the offset of the desired time zone from their home time zone and then would rotate the bezel accordingly. Then to display the home time zone once again, the user would rotate the bezel back to its home position. You'll see I removed the adhesive protection and inserted the bezel insert. Now I'm just checking to make sure that it still rotates freely and does not bind in any of the positions. With everything cased up and the bracelet now attached, I can move on to getting the bracelet put on. Again, there was a mixed bag of bracelets going with these watches. Most of the GMT builds had oyster-style bracelets. This one features a Jubilee. The Datejust builds had Jubilee bracelets with a different style of clasp. Luckily, a spreadsheet was created and shared with me that laid out every officer and their watch of choice, along with any and all modifications they wanted to have done. This was extremely helpful for keeping everything straight. Getting the bracelet on is the same process as before. A spring bar is run through the end link of the bracelet, and then the bracelet is inserted between the lugs with one of the ends of the spring bar in place. The other end of the spring bar is then compressed and inserted between the lugs. When released, the spring bar extends and is set into a little indent in the lug, securing it in place. The watch is then rotated around and the same is done on the other side. After this first batch of watches had been built and delivered, a few more one-off watches were commissioned for other members of the unit. When I went to hand deliver them to the officer behind all of these builds, I noticed he had swapped his Jubilee bracelet out for a NATO strap. This, in a way, is a much more suitable option as the durability, adjustability, and comfort of the lightweight NATO strap are perfect for the daily wear of a law enforcement officer. With the bracelet now securely in place, the watch is complete. I want to give a big thank you to the officers, not only for commissioning these builds, but for all the work they do on a daily basis. It's always a pleasure working with law enforcement units on these custom watches, and it gives me a great opportunity to meet some really cool people serving the community. The watches, much like the units, all have their own unique story behind them, and it's always great to discuss various elements of the build that the unit and officers want included before sitting down to build the final product. I've mainly stayed local with these types of builds, but I hope to begin branching out and working with various units across California and throughout the states. As always, if you or somebody you know is interested in commissioning a custom watch, please feel free to reach out to me at garrett@goldenstatewatchshop.com or over on Instagram at goldenstatewatchshop, and I'd be more than happy to discuss the build with you in more detail. We're going to finish this one up with some shots of the watch in natural sunlight. Thanks for watching.